Okay, welcome to part two of our discussion of Module 4, Civil Liberties. So as promised, we will start here with the Establishment Clause. This is an additional part of the First Amendment. So the first part that we talked about was freedom of expression, and there are multiple aspects of this concept of freedom of expression. Some aspects that are protected, some aspects that are not. So the Establishment Clause is actually referring to, let's go back to our handout, sorry about that, here, where it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, establishing religion, prohibiting free exercise of religion. Both of those components contribute to how we understand the Establishment Clause. Basically, this focuses on requiring Congress to strike a balance between recognizing individuals and groups' right to practice religion, but refraining from becoming involved in perpetuating any one religion over another. So, but Congress can also has to make sure they're not being seen as prohibiting any kind of religion or restricting religious practice. So it's a very delicate balance, and that's where the term the Establishment Clause comes from. Now, this is a foundation for a key characteristic of American government, which is the separation of church and state. So the Establishment Clause is also the foundation for that separation. That is where the separation comes from. That's what it's based on. So states can't become involved with religious matters. And I go back and forth, states and the federal government, both forms of government. They can't get involved in religious matters, but they also have to accommodate religion and the free exercise of religion. They cannot restrict religious groups. So thinking here about the separation of church and state and what that actually means, free exercise of religion means they can't restrict religious groups from engaging in their religious activities without a compelling government interest, and they have to prove that the government action can't be achieved any other way. They also can't pass any laws or create any government procedures that have a negative impact on religious practice. So it's important for you to understand this balancing act that the federal government and state governments have to engage in. They can't enact any laws that prohibit people of specific religions from distributing literature. They can't enact any laws that would violate religious dietary restrictions, even for people who are in prison or jail. And they also have to keep in mind that sometimes when individuals make claims for religious freedom, even if it's not a dominant religion, this Establishment Clause requires the federal government and state governments to respect those individuals' rights to religious freedom, in addition to the dominant religions that might be well known in this country. So, keeping that in mind, then, we've kind of spent some time unpacking the First Amendment. I also wanted to spend some time exploring civil liberties and the war on terror. So we'll move here and think about what we know of our civil liberties, what we understand them to be, these protections that we have enshrined in our Constitution, and the ways, the conditions under which they are most likely to be threatened. In times of war, those are very high on the list in terms of likelihood for civil liberties to be threatened. So we want to think critically. Looking back at history, we can look at the Japanese internment during World War II, when President Roosevelt issued an executive order. It was number 9066. And what that executive order did was authorize the internment or the gathering up of over 120,000 Japanese people. 2/3 of them were American citizens. So this executive order basically authorized that these citizens and other individuals' rights be violated, their civil liberties be violated by forcibly gathering them up and relocating them to internment camps. Even when the Supreme Court case, Korematsu, went all the way to the Supreme Court. He was an individual, he was a citizen, and he sued the federal government, basically saying that his civil liberties had been violated. But the Supreme Court upheld the internment, basically giving deference to the executive branch and showing that they were willing to allow the executive branch to have expanded authority during a time of war. And that expanded authority meant our civil liberties were threatened. So then moving forward to think about September 11th, 2001, and what we currently understand as the War on Terror. And when you see the film, Unconstitutional, it'll get into this in much more detail. But President Bush, the president at the time, authorized several actions that expanded the powers of the executive branch, specifically the law enforcement branch of the executive government. So warrantless wiretaps, prisoners of war being held at Guantanamo Bay prison without access to their attorneys, having their civil rights and their civil liberties violated, torture, interrogation techniques being used. All of these are considered violations of civil liberties. However, they all happened, and they were the federal government, specifically the executive branch, attempted to justify those actions, again by saying, well, civil liberties have to be infringed upon because we are in a time of war. You also should note in your textbook this important case. I'm probably not going to pronounce it right. Boumediene versus Bush, which also went to the Supreme Court, and the court ruled that even individuals who are characterized, as prisoners of war or enemy combatants, they have the right to have a hearing in a court, and they have the right to have access to an attorney, and so forth. So, but again, both of these cases, Japanese internment, September 11th, both of these cases show the infringement of civil liberties by the federal government. So what you need to do is watch the film and video clips on Canvas in Module 4. There are two now. There was only one, but now there are two. Unconstitutional, the War on Our Civil Liberties, and also there's a student debate on civil liberties. So you need to watch them both, take notes, and there are some points for you to consider, some critical thinking questions on Canvas. So just watch those videos and use them as additional resources, and be sure that you're prepared to discuss those critical thinking questions. All right, thanks very much. I'll see you at the next video.